えねえ、私のポケットモンスターと勝負しない？
あんただーれ？
モンスター全部で150種類。
Let's go back to the year 1996. Pokemon Red and Green have just been released in Japan after a grueling 6-year development cycle. The games ultimately ended up being a hit, and in the end, it was actually probably a good thing for Nintendo that those games were delayed as long as they were, because it ended up being a shot in the arm for the Game Boy, extending the life period of a system that, technologically speaking, was outdated the year it launched in 1989. Now, it's kind of hard to imagine at this point, almost a quarter of a century later, but there was no telling what was going to happen next for Game Freak and for Pokemon as a franchise. The games were definitely successful in Japan, but the localization for the West was going poorly. Essentially, there would have to be a complete recompiling of the code in order to get those games ready for the West. So it would end up being over 2 years before the West saw those games. In that time, Game Freak created a modest upgrade to Red and Green in Pokemon Blue in Japan, as well as a follow-up Pokemon Yellow, which tied in with the anime that was created as a tie-in for the game series. And despite taking on a few side projects, Game Freak was really in financial trouble. All in all, it looks like the sequels to Red and Green could very well be Game Freak's last game. With all of that pressure, doing side projects, the financial stress of being super close to going out of business, Game Freak would have been forgiven for creating sequels that were moderate upgrades. Maybe a few new creatures, a new area to explore, but nothing majorly revolutionary. Game Freak didn't play that way back in the 90s. They went all out with Pokemon Gold and Silver. Not only did we get a new region, Johto, we also got 100 new Pokemon, and all 151 Pokemon from the previous generation were available to use in this generation. So all in all, you had about 251 Pokemon to choose from. But that's not all that they added. They added a day and night cycle. They added days of the week where certain events happened only on specific days of the week. They added a breeding program because, yeah, now Pokemon have genders. So you could take Pokemon, one which was a male and one which was a female or a ditto, and give it to the daycare couple, and after a few days, boom, there's an egg, and you can hatch a new Pokemon from that egg. You can breed them. Hey guys, what's up? It's me, but, from the future. As I was editing this, I was like, maybe I should put something in about egg groups. So then I was like, okay, let's do some research. And while doing my research, I discovered that Nidoqueen can't breed. Nor can Nidorina. Which is weird. It's even weirder that I, for whatever reason, never knew this? Like, I've been breeding Pokemon since the year 2000. You'd think I would have run across this, especially since Nidokeeng's one of my favorite Pokemon. I mean, I could go back and choose 2 different Pokemon. That probably would have been less time-consuming than this, but Nidoking and Nidoqueen are like the 2 most recognizable male-female Pokemon. And it's absolutely crazy that just because of a glitch in Generation 2, where Nidorina and Nidoqueen weren't recognized as female, you can't breed with a Nidoqueen. Some Pokemon had completely new Pokemon as their baby forms, and that was pointless and really just kind of a gimmick and stupid, but that's okay. I mean, breeding was a good idea. Oh yeah, and don't forget that Pokemon could now hold items, creating whole new strategies for battles, and there were even 2 new types, the Steel type and the Dark type. The Dark type in particular was a boon to Pokemon, because in the original generation, the Ghost Pokemon in that generation were also Poison type, which meant that Psychic was strong against them. Psychic Pokemon were gods in the first generation. And the second generation, thanks to the Dark type being introduced, balanced that out. And then, after you beat the game, defeated Team Rocket, got all 8 badges from Johto, and defeated the Elite Four, there was more. You could actually return to Kanto. All of it was there from the previous game. I mean, Cinnabar Island wasn't really there because it got destroyed by a volcano, and it was pretty sparse. But it was a Game Boy Color game. You can only fit so much on those little cartridges, right? I mean, it was incredible that you could explore that original region, and then at the end of it all, after you got another 8 badges from the Kanto gym leaders, you got to play yourself from the previous games. That's right, you could take on Red, the trainer and hero of Pokemon Red and Green. When you talk to people like myself who have been playing Pokemon since day one, The reason that we have such fond memories of Generation 2 is because of how monumental a leap it actually was. In fact, it still remains my favorite generation of Pokemon games, despite the fact that other games have come along with better graphics, better mechanics, all around more polished than Generation 2, but none have been quite that jump. None were quite as monumental. Those games, you can tell the creators poured their heart and soul into them. I didn't even mean to do that. Look at Kanto from the original games. It's a fine enough place to explore, but it doesn't have a terrible amount of character. Well, then you go to Johto, and there is history to the buildings, history to the legendary Pokemon. I mean, there just is such a richness to Generation 2. Looking back now, it's easy to see that the development team for Pokemon Gold and Silver felt like this could be it for Pokemon, and they laid everything on the table. The result were two games that have gone down in history as two of the greatest. It's not to say that the games weren't perfect, there are still plenty of bugs in them, and each generation has gotten smoother and smoother with regard to gameplay, graphics, and of course, smoothing out glitches. So now let's fast forward almost 20 years to June 2019. I have to admit that I was curious to see more on Pokemon Sword and Shield because the reveal of those games hadn't really gotten me too excited. And E3 didn't really get me more excited. It's been pointed out by other YouTubers. There's a great video done by Arlo. It's called Pokemon Has a Pokemon Problem, but the fact that it was announced that not every single Pokemon was going to be available, and the reason given for that was the fact that the team didn't have, the time and resources to accomplish that. Now, as has been pointed out by Arlo in his video that I mentioned before, that seems a little bit like a cop-out. I mean, it's Pokemon. It's literally the most lucrative media franchise ever. That's a fact. It has made more money than any other media franchise, more than Mickey Mouse, more than Batman, you name it. Okay, wait a second. I don't want to derail this video, but can we just take a moment to stop and appreciate the fact that the second biggest media franchise of all time in terms of revenue is Hello Kitty? I would have thought for sure it would have been like Star Wars or a Disney property, but I don't know. It's just, you never, who would expect Hello Kitty? Oh dear heavens, she will rule us all. Instead of a Dark Lord, we will have a queen. Not dark, but beautiful and terrible as the dawn, tempestuous as the sea and stronger than the foundations of the earth. All shall love her and despair. We have fun. So why not invest some of the money into making your games totally incredible? Oh. That's why. The games have only made a paltry $16 billion of the $96 billion that the Pokemon franchise has made, while merchandising has made up the bulk of it. There's a whole multi-pronged machine that Pokemon fuels. There's merchandise that has to be made. There's hardware that Nintendo's manufacturing to tie in with the games. There's the fact that, realistically speaking, games like Luigi's Mansion and The Legend of Zelda Link's Awakening, they're not going to sell systems during the holiday season, but Pokemon, that's going to convince so many parents to get the Switch for their children so that they can play the latest Pokemon. And that's the sad thing. The Pokemon Company, I have no doubt, wants to make great games, but they are limited by the fact that they have to have new games come out at a particular time. And there are so many other companies depending on them. It's like, okay, bear with me here. I used to live in Victoria, British Columbia, and just north of Victoria, there's a park called Goldstream Provincial Park. And if you go there in November, December, at the end of the salmon run, you will see eagles taking advantage of all of the dying salmon. It smells horrendous, but it's absolutely worth it to see these majestic creatures. And I don't mean that ironically, they are really a sight to behold in the wild. Hearing them, on the other hand, is slightly disappointing. Now I'm in Salt Lake City, and the Hogle Zoo has 3 of these animals in captivity. Now, all of them were found in the wild. A couple of them were injured, one of them was missing a wing, and so the Hogle Zoo brought them in because they wouldn't survive in the wild. And they've got a pretty nice exhibit, but it is still just a fancy cage. And there's just something about seeing these animals caged up, unable to fly and hunt, that is super depressing. It's the one exhibit that I always just zip right past because it makes me super sad. And in a way, Game Freak's kind of like that. The Pokemon games and the development of Pokemon games are very much in a cage. They have to come out at a certain time. They're fueling a gigantic merchandising behemoth. And because of that, these incredible creators are caged up and not able to spread their wings and fly. Oh gosh, that's super cheesy. See, you look at a game series like The Legend of Zelda, and yeah, there's merchandise connected with The Legend of Zelda, but nowhere near the degree as Pokemon. So if they want to take 5 years to develop the game, they can. If they want to delay the game, and then delay it again, and then delay it again, they can, and they have, and they will. Nintendo, when they're developing a first-party game, they will delay it as long as they need to get it right. And they have the ability to do that with games like The Legend of Zelda and Super Mario, because there isn't this big behemoth that those games fuel. And I guess the whole point of this video is the fact that I miss the days when Game Freak knew that they had a good series on their hands, but didn't know yet that it was going to be a multi-decade phenomenon. They had no idea what the future was going to hold for Pokemon, and so they got to shape it. But now the future of Pokemon no longer rests in the hands of the developers at Game Freak. The future of Pokemon is decided by investors, CEOs, people who are looking at growing the franchise as a whole. And so every decision that's made for the games has to be done through that filter. The games can't introduce anything too unpredictable because, well, predictability sells. You don't want to make something that could alienate certain fans of the franchise. Instead, you want to make a product that is solid, but also comfortably familiar. Back in 1997, when Game Freak began developing Pokemon Gold and Silver, there was this unspoken understanding that this was going to be most likely the last Pokemon games ever. Because of that, they did everything in their power to create lasting masterpieces. And that mindset has been absent from Pokemon pretty much ever since. Except for maybe Black and White, because it explored very complex themes about how, maybe extreme opinions can be incredibly dangerous and, the very morality of catching Pokemon and training them to fight each other. I don't think it's impossible to get back into that mindset though. And maybe they'll get back into that mindset of truly wanting to innovate instead of trying to create a new entry that is neither worse than the one that came before nor better than the one that will inevitably come after. So I'm going to be buying one of the games. It's kind of hypocritical after me saying that I'm really not happy with the direction that they're going in, but the reason for that is I think that I do need to make a follow-up to this video after I've played the game. And I will link this video to that video, just to give you sort of an update after I have played the game. It would be completely unfair for me to not play through the game and do an update, and I want to do that. That said, I literally couldn't care less about which version I get, so here's a poll. Which should I get, Sword or should I get Shield? You guys let me know, and... excuse me, you guys let me know, and I'll do that. Also, let me just throw this out there. Chase, Machiavelli 3, and Tony Barron, you guys are awesome. They're patrons. They've actually decided that I am worthy enough to give me money. That's insensitive. They've decided that they want to support me in creating these videos, and I am incredibly appreciative. They are definitely helping me work towards a dream where maybe I can start doing this, full time. Also, I'm still making that video about Donkey Kong and Super Mario World. I promise it's coming soon. You should subscribe and maybe, ring the bell. And if you like to give it a like and leave a comment about what you think. I don't know. I've re-recorded this ending 6 or 7 times now. We're done.